Thank you all for joining us today for the first DAP Learning Series webinar of 2020. It's good to see some of your names, and I guess not faces, but see you all again joining us for our 2020 series. Freddie and I last month planned out the entire year's worth of webinars, and I think we've got some really great ones this year. Today we'll be discussing the YouTube event option. Just as a note, keep an eye out probably either later this week or early next week. I'm going to be sending out links to the entire year's worth of training. We've already got all the event pages created, and so you can register and plan to attend whichever ones are most interesting to you, or heck, you can attend all of them. We'd love to have you. My name's Tim Loudon. I'm the manager for the Digital Analytics program. I'm joined today by my colleagues in Digitalgov University, Alex and Alex. We affectionately refer to them as the A-team, as well as my always wonderful colleague, Freddie Blicker, who will be helping to answer questions in the chat box and also relaying them to me at the end of the webinar. Just as a note, we always record these webinars, and if you miss anything, it'll be posted later on, both on the event page itself on digital.gov and on our YouTube Analytics playlist, so you can check it there. And the slides will be posted on the event page as well. There are some links in the slides as I get further in the discussion today that may be valuable for you, but you can always just Google the things I talk about as well. As I noted, there's a chat box. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat box, and if it's something very specific, Freddie might answer you directly, or we'll save all the questions to be relayed back at the end of the webinar. And one last thing before I get into the meat and potatoes of the discussion, I just wanted to make a quick disclaimer and apologize before I start that I'm working from my home office, and my 6-month-old son was diagnosed with the flu this week. He's currently napping down the hall. So if you hear a baby crying in the middle of this presentation, allow me to offer my apologies now, and hopefully he won't cry very long. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into talking about the Digital Analytics Program YouTube event option. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, the first thing we'll just briefly talk about, which is somewhat self-evident, but I think it's important to understand why we track data like this. But why have data on embedded videos on your web pages? What does that provide us? We'll talk about how to implement the DAP YouTube event tracker. And part of the reason I wanted to do this webinar, aside from the fact that a few folks did request it, but one of the things that really made it hit home was that I noticed that this particular option or feature in the Digital Analytics program code is not used as heavily as I think it could be. I'm not sure if that's because maybe there aren't a lot of folks that are embedding YouTube videos in government. I tend to think that that's probably not the case. And I think a lot of folks maybe just didn't know that we had this option. So we're going to talk about how easy it is to implement this and be able to start getting data. And then I'm going to go over how to report on YouTube events in the DAP Google Analytics account. And there's a little asterisk there I'll talk about in a second. And then finally, we've got some bonus YouTube and Google Analytics knowledge that some of the stuff I discovered while I was preparing for this webinar, and I think it's worth passing on to you all because it's just kind of interesting to know. Okay, so for the asterisk, we learned some interesting things in preparing for this webinar, specifically for reporting, and I'll expound on that more later. So first, why track video plays at all? And you can see on the right-hand side, I've got this little screenshot. This is the video that we're going to be focusing on today. It's on a NASA page. It's the Introduction to the Electromagnetic Spectrum. It's one of the most viewed videos that we have for those who implement this option in the DAP account. So it's probably something used by teachers. It makes sense that there's a lot of views on this particular video, but it's in like the top 3 most viewed videos, I think, in all of the DAP data that we have. So why is it worth tracking it? Well, number one, especially if you are creating videos yourself. Now, when I say creating videos yourself, maybe you have a video team on staff, or maybe you contract out creation of the video. But either way, you want to know, okay, is there a return on investment there? if you're spending money to create videos, I know video production can be very expensive. So are people watching it? Basically, you want to know, is it worth us spending the money to be able to create these things? Or is it better, you know, the last bullet there, would it be better just to have this maybe as text or as still photos with instructions as a guide rather than compose a video itself, which takes a lot of resources. Number two, you know, are there better places to put the video embeds to get more views? In the same way that we would talk about using, for example, A/B testing to test whether or not a button got more clicks if it was red or blue, or if you placed it somewhere different on the page. We can use information from tracking data about video plays in Google Analytics to understand whether or not there might be a better place to put the video. And mostly, I would think it would mean on a different page, on the home page. I suppose you could change up where it was located on the page as well. Another thing, are the videos too long? So one of the data points that we can collect is how far through the video your visitors are getting. And so if you find that, you know, the vast majority of folks are starting the video, but then they're leaving before they get halfway through, that might give you some information about if you're going to continue video creation, you might want to try to make shorter snippets. And you know, along with that is kind of, are you holding the attention of your users? So I think those are all the reasons why we might want information about the video embeds on our pages, and the DAP YouTube event is here to try to help you make those decisions. Okay, so implementing the YouTube tracker. So I'm not sure the kind of responsibilities that all the folks who are attending this webinar have, but basically, if you can go to the person who implemented the DAP script tag for you in the first place, I would imagine it's probably a developer, maybe, like I said, maybe on team, maybe a contractor. But you can see here, this is a screenshot. And what I did is I just went to the video page that we're going to be looking at, and I right-clicked and went to View Page Source. And I specifically looked for YT equals true, which is how we turned it on. And then what that does is it shows me in the script source here, here is, oops, I didn't need to click on that. That's the DAP code. But here is the script that basically makes DAP code work. It's just one line, script language, JavaScript. We have this special ID, and we have a location where it calls the code. And then the way that we make our optional features work is through query parameters at the end of this source URL. So you can see here we've got a question mark, and it says agency equals NASA. So that passes a custom dimension into Google Analytics that tells us that this page belongs to NASA. We've got a sub-agency, GSFC, which I don't even know what that stands for, to be honest, but it's a subdivision of NASA. And then we've got YT equals true. And that is how you turn on the YouTube tracking functionality. It's as easy as that. You add into your script and YT equals true. So by default, in our code, we've got YT equals false. The reason why we do that and not have it universally turned on for all sites is that not all sites actually embed YouTube videos. And if it's true, but your site does not embed YouTube videos, then it does still send a call to a YouTube API, which isn't really relevant or necessary if you don't embed YouTube videos. So we've made this an option to turn on, and the way you do it is to add YT equals true into your script in the source. This last one here, the DC link, is the option to turn on demographics and interest information, which NASA has also done. So going back to my slides here, I noted you add YT equals true into your script. We've got more documentation if you really want to look into it. You can download right here the entire code capabilities and reference. But we've got here, you can go to automatic YouTube tracking, and it's going to basically tell you to do the same thing. It's just going to give you some examples of putting in YT equals true. And this can also be done if you implement with tag managers. So in this case, you saw that this script was dropped right in the HTML. It was right in the source code. You could just go in there and change it. I know that tag managers are becoming more and more popular. And if your site implements the DAP code with a tag manager, basically what you do is you just have a tag that lives within Tag Manager, but it contains this exact same script. So you have to create a custom HTML tag. You drop the script in the HTML tag. You create a trigger that fires on every page load. And so you would go into Telium or Google Tag Manager, whatever you're using, and you just go into that particular tag and add in this information right here in the script. And then it would also work and start recording information for any pages for which you have embedded YouTube videos. So how do you know if you succeeded when you attempted to implement? So there's two real ways. I certainly prefer the second way, but the first way is you could go into Google Analytics in real-time events and actually look. And so I think I've got that here for us. So I'm in Google Analytics. You can see I'm in the NASA agency profile because that's the particular site that we are caring about for this webinar. And if I go down in real time, on the left-hand side, there's events, and you can see events that are happening in real time. Or this is like in the last so many minutes. And so we'll talk about the structure of events in terms of category, event, and action, or category of action and label in just a few minutes. But you can see here, one of the things here is YouTube video. So if I then click on YouTube video, it would give me all of the events where YouTube video plays happened and the different event actions here, 33%, pause, play, and so on. The hard part is if you wanted to say, make sure that this particular video was recording into Google Analytics. So number one, you would go here and you would actually play it so that you would trigger the event. But then what you'd need to do is actually know the video URL. So if I right click here, I can click copy video URL. I can open a new tab, paste that in, and you can see it's LWF JPC something, something, something. And so if I go back in here, my guess is that because this is one of the most popular videos, there it is. If I hover on the event label, because it unfortunately doesn't give you the whole thing, you can see this is youtube.com/embed LWFJPC. So this is right what we see here. There were 6 plays of the video, the specific video that we were looking at right here in the last, I think this is like 5 minutes or something like that. If I hit 30 minutes, does it change? Yeah, it goes way up. So this is talking about active users right now. There are so many active users that have actually hit play on this video. So that's one way to check if it's working, although it's a bit tedious because you have to actually like do some extra work to make sure, in the case that with NASA here, they've got many videos that are being tracked. You have to make sure that you match it up. So another way that you can do it that I think is much easier is I can use what's called Tag Assistant. So Tag Assistant is a Chrome extension that helps you track what data is being sent to Google Analytics and if Google Analytics is even active on a page at all. And the little icon for it up here in the top right is this like little tag with a happy face in it. So if I hit enable on this tag and then I refresh this page and then I hit play, you all won't hear any audio here, but the video is just playing. And if let's say I hop around in this video a little bit, and then I go here, one of the things that we can see, if I look in, now there's 2 different Google Analytics accounts on this page. So this is one way that you can also troubleshoot, looking to see if your implementations at all are actually working. So this is a non-DAP implementation, and this 145-1 is our account. So if I click on that, it then tells me what's going on here. Page view requests, keep alive, and so on. And I think maybe actually it didn't work. Hang on. So if I hit this now, and hopefully if I hit pause, yeah, it's not actually working at the moment. So when I did this just last week, it actually gives you events right here so you can see it. I'm not sure if that's because I'm doing something where Zoom is preventing it from actually firing, but that's another way that you can check. And when you do that, it'll appear like this, where it says event, and it'll tell you YouTube video was sent. So I'm going to have to mess around with that in just a minute to make sure that it works like I thought it did. Okay, moving on. So the real bread and butter is, okay, once we implement, how are we actually getting reporting on it? And so your instinct may be to tell you to go to the default reporting interface, which is like we've got right here. If I were to go into the NASA profile and I go to, in the left-hand side under behavior, there's an events section. And then let's say I go to top events. We can then see all the events that are happening. We've got outbound links and scroll tracking and things like that. Here is YouTube video. Now, one thing that you'll see and that I mentioned here is that the default reporting interface in the event section does not lend itself very well to looking at data for individual videos. And let me kind of explain what I mean by that. So if I were to click YouTube video, and notice this is the event category. So if you're new to Google Analytics events, they're set up in a hierarchy of event category, event action, and event label. And things get more granular as you go with, as you go through that hierarchy. So it's most broad at event category, and it's most granular at event label. So obviously, YouTube video doesn't tell us anything really other than there are a whole lot of events that happen throughout all the NASA sites related to YouTube videos. But if I click through YouTube video, it'll bring the event action. Now, in this case, this is the actions that are recorded are the various different data points for clicking in the video itself. So we've got play, we've got pause, we've got finish, and then percentages. You'll notice here that this still isn't telling me anything about a specific video. It's telling me in aggregate of all the videos, we've got a lot of plays and a lot of pauses and some finishes and so on. So I could click into play, for example, and it would then give me event label, which in this case, the DAP YouTube tracker passes the actual URL of the video itself. So notice before we got the URL and it said LWF JPC. This is the video that the electromagnetic spectrum video. And we also added something that says origin is from science.nasa.gov, so you know which site it's from, but it's not telling you the exact page that it's from. So in order to find that, what I can do is isolate this particular label and then add a secondary dimension for page. When I add a secondary dimension for page, it will then tell me, okay, these are basically it's one page. This has, for some reason, an index page as well. But 75,000 total plays happened on science.nasa.gov/EMS01 intro, which is here, right? And it's for this particular video. Now, if you were to have multiple videos on the page, obviously you would need to know the specific URL of each video in order to be able to see what's going on. But even so, this is not an ideal setup because we're only looking at play. So we don't really have a good idea of in the single video, in the electromagnetic spectrum video, how many plays, pauses, finishes, 33% do we have in that one video. Now the good news is we can create that on our own with a custom report, which I'm going to show you how to do in just a second. So I do not recommend being able to, or going into the default events section in order to do in-depth analysis on the data you're getting for any particular video. It's just, it doesn't, the way that the event action and labels are set up, it doesn't give you the granularity that you need to be able to see it in the correct way. So before we go into the custom report, so I can show you how to do that, we need to talk about the difference between unique events and total events, because this is really a big deal when it comes to video plays. And I was really, really amazed at the difference between the unique and total events that we have for this particular video. So let's talk about this. A unique event can only be counted once per session, right? And a session being the entirety of time that a user is in your specific website. So here's the example. I'm on the electromagnetic spectrum video. A user presses play. I press play. I watch 30 seconds. I pause it because who knows what's happening. I talk to my roommate or a coworker says something to me, I don't know, and then I press play again and finish watching the video. In the unique event column, you would only have one event that fired for play, because even though I hit the play button twice, you can only have one unique event per session. So I could hit the play button 50 times in a session, but it would be one unique event. So that's where we get into total events here. They count every single time something happens. So regardless of session, if I did that same scenario, I pressed play, paused it after 30 seconds, press play again, in the total events section, you would have 2 total events. Now, that makes a huge difference. And I'll show you in a second when I get the custom report up why, for videos, I highly recommend only looking at the unique events for your analysis. So let's create a custom report to be able to get this information the way we want it. So I'm starting from the normal homepage. I'm in the NASA agency profile. I'm going to go to customization and click custom reports. Now, I've got a bunch of custom reports here. I've actually already got one that I created to show you, but I'm going to just create a new one so we can build it from scratch and I can talk through the thought process here. So this is going to be NASA YouTube data, and I'm just going to add webinar in here so I know that this is the example that I used. So I'm in the custom reporting section using an Explorer report. Explorer report, we want to keep that for this. And now I need to specify metrics and dimensions. For those of you that are relatively new to Google Analytics, this may seem pretty complicated, but one of the things that will really, really help your analysis is understanding how to create custom reports and by choosing your own metrics and dimensions. And if this is something that sounds intimidating to you, we have another webinar on our playlist where we go over the various different kinds of custom reports and how to create them. So really all I care about for this is I'm gonna put in unique events as a metric, and I'm gonna put in total events just so I can show you the difference here. So it's gonna give me quantitative data on unique events and total events. Now, for the dimension drill downs, how can we structure this so that it better shows me what's going on for a single video? And the way we do that is, okay, well, what's the first way that we would identify a video that we wanted to get in data for? And I think for me, if I were the folks that put together this NASA page, and I had videos all over other pages, the first thing I'd want to do is be able to drill down at a page level. Now, there's only one video on this particular page, but let's say there were multiple, but we also had videos all over the rest of the site. The first way for me to get to an analysis of this electromagnetic spectrum video would be, okay, well, I know it lives on /EMS/01_intro. So that is a page level, page dimension. So the first thing we want to see is page. So create a report where the first page of results we have is just telling us the different pages where videos exist. Then from there, what is valuable? So as we saw in the event section in the default reporting, event category for this is the same for everything. It's just YouTube video. So we don't really need event category in what we see in the report because we're going to specify that later in the filters. But what is valuable is the URL of the video itself. Because if I had multiple videos on a single page and I clicked through that page in the report, then I would say, okay, well, there are 3 videos on this page. I want to analyze video number 2. I could get the URL for that video, and then I could click through that to see other information. So the video URL, in this case, is passed as event label. So I could put that as my secondary dimension. And then finally, when I clicked on a specific video that lives on a specific page, I would want information about the actions taken on that video, which is play, pause, finish, and the percentages, right? So this is where we would put event action. So now what we've done is we've created a report that says, show me unique and total events. First thing I want to see is all the pages with videos. Then I want to pick a specific video, and then I want to see what was done on that specific video. Okay, Now we need to filter it. So how are we going to filter this? The first thing is I'm going to filter it specifically for this site. So I don't want to see all of the NASA website videos. I just want to see videos that appear on science.nasa.gov. Now you could change this yourself and make it whatever you want. If you want to just leave it open to all the videos in your entire agency that are being tracked with the DAP code, then you could just not have this filter. But in this case, I'm going to add a filter for hostname, and I'm going to tell it I want it to match science.nasa.gov. So all the videos that live on this site. Now, I also want to make sure that I'm specifying the events that we see. So in this case, I have to narrow away from all total events. And I don't want to see the event label and action for outbound link clicks or mail to clicks or something like that. So I want to specify that the event category matches YouTube video. And you can see when I start typing, if I put YO, it'll suggest it for me. So now I've created the report. And we're saying, show me all the pages that have videos, then let me pick a video, then let me see what was done on that video, specifically on this site, and only for the event that matches video data. I know that could seem like a lot, but once you play around with custom events and you get to know your dimensions, you play around with custom reports and you get to know your metrics and dimensions, this becomes much easier. So I'm going to hit save, and we're going to see what happens here. Hopefully I put it together correctly. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get a flat line and it doesn't work. But OK, so this looks like it worked. We're looking at the last 30 days. And you can see here, I've got now, this is what I started with. The first dimension that I chose was page. So I've got all the different pages that contain videos. And you see we've got aggregate unique events and total events for the videos. That doesn't really tell me that much at this point. But this particular video lives on EMS 01 intro. So we're going to go back here, and I'm going to click through and say, OK, I want to see the videos that appear on that page. Again, in this case, we only have one. So when I click through here, it should only give me one new row of data, which will be the URL for that particular video. But if I had multiple on this page, it should give me all the URLs of all the videos that are embedded on that particular page. Of course, Google Analytics doesn't want to cooperate when I'm doing a webinar, in the same way that Tag Assistant didn't want to cooperate. Let's see if I can go over here and maybe speed this along a little bit. OK, looks like one decided to work faster than the other. So we'll just leave that one running. So now we've got youtube.com, embed, and this is LWFJPC. This is the video that we know we have on this particular page. That's great. So in this case, let me go back to this and get rid of some of these here so I don't keep going to the wrong tabs. So OK, we've got this video. We need to click through it again, because now when I choose the video on that page that I want to see, it's going to give me, aha, for this specific video that we just picked, here are the actions that happened. So we've got play, pause, finish, and the percentages. Now, I wanted to come back to talking about unique and total events, because you're going to see why this is really important. Take a look at the difference between unique and total events, especially for play and pause. 6,200 unique plays, 75,000 total. So we're talking at more than a 10 times inflated amount for total events. But this kind of makes sense once you look at pause, because we've got 5,000 pauses that are unique, but 47,000 total. So what this tells me is that this particular video, and I went and looked at other videos as well just to see if this type of ratio held on various other videos. And there are always, the total events is always a lot higher, but it's not 10 times higher, right? But what we see for this video, what that tells me is that this video is very, very often started and then paused, and then started and then paused, and then started and paused until you get to however far you're going to look at it. And I think that the reason for that if I were to make an assumption, just not being anyone who knows anything about this particular page because I don't work at NASA, but I would make the assumption that I think this is a video that is used a lot in classrooms, and it is something where a teacher will play a small part, stop, talk about that part, and then press play again and continue on. That's the best I could come up with without, having any deeper knowledge. But that's why I think unique events are much more beneficial for you to look at than total events here, because it doesn't really matter if somebody pressed play 75,000 times. What you really want to know is there were 6,200 times somebody pressed play on that video in a session. Meaning in reality, you had 6,200 views of that particular video. You did not have 75,000 views of that video. So again, when we were in the other section, when we were looking at events in the default reporting, it gives you total events first and then unique events, and I think that's misleading. Now, total events for something like, for example, PDF downloads, maybe you'd want to take that over unique events, because if someone downloads something 10 times, you'd want to know that. But in this case for videos, unique events is really the way you want to go. And the other thing that I think is really important to take a look at here is so you can create a ratio now where you've got, you had 6,200 people start it, or it was started 6,200 times. I should be careful. Doesn't necessarily mean there were that many humans that did it. But it was started 6,200 times, and you had 2,400 folks finish it. So you're going at a clip of greater than a third of folks that start the video actually get all the way to the end. And for any of you that have watched videos before, I think that's actually pretty impressive. I certainly am not a person that will watch a video until you hit the end. And so I'll usually bail, once it starts wrapping up or something like that. So take into account that, videos are fickle in this way, because also the other thing you can do that is not really tracked is you can jump around within the video by clicking in the load bar rather than clicking start and stop. But that is part of my prediction of why the play button is hit so many more times, because I think folks are moving around here and hitting play rather than hitting pause and then play. So lots of different things to take into account. Now, something that I am sad that I have to discuss, but I definitely have to discuss with you all, because while we were doing this preparation, I discovered something that was disappointing, and I want to tell you about it and then tell you about how we're going to fix it. We went through the whole custom report, and there's a template here that you can click on, and then you'll just need to change the specific site, and you can then recreate this report. It's already done for you. But here's the disappointing thing. So while preparing for this webinar, we found a bug in the way that specifically the percentage events are recorded for this particular feature. And it was not something that we had caught before, even though we had done QA. But basically, my expectation for how this works is that when a user crosses the 33% or 66% or 90% threshold of a video, that the event should fire when the user crosses that point when the video is playing. Now that can get hairy when you can do things like jump around the video like this. But regardless, if a user skips through here, you would assume that they would have this once it, for example, started playing at 70%, that the 66% event would fire, for example. The reality is, what we discovered is that currently it's not happening that way. And the way that the percentages are firing is a bit misleading. And currently, if I have understood our code the way, or correctly at least when I looked at it, is that the percentage events are actually only firing right now when the player state is in pause mode, which is not correct. Because if a person starts a video and watches it all the way through and never pauses it, you would theoretically not get any percentage events firing, which is wrong. So that is a bug that we have in our code. And I've already consulted with our developers and our Google Analytics vendor, and we're working to get a new code version out with a fix for that as soon as possible. But right now, it's best if you currently already have the YouTube event enabled, excuse me, Or if you're planning on enabling it after you see this webinar, right now, until we get that fix out, I would only analyze play, pause, and finish, because the percentages won't really give you the information that you're looking for. For example, like this is one of the things that tipped me off. Why would we have fewer 90% events than finishes? And it's because in reality, you're just getting, this is only folks that hit pause in the 90% threshold. So apologies for that. Certainly is not something that I was hoping that we would find. I'm glad that we found it in preparation for this, because now we can fix it and make sure that the data is exactly what you think it will be. So keep an eye out for communications from me about when we get that fixed. Okay, that said, moving on to happier things here. Bonus questions regarding YouTube and Google Analytics. So I stumbled across a bunch of different things here that I think are valuable for those of you that are interested in this topic. The first thing, do you think embedded video plays on a web page count towards your total YouTube video views? In other words, if I go to YouTube itself and I find this electromagnetic spectrum video, which I could do, I could copy the video URL and I could go here. Oh, we already have it, right? So if I go here, you'll see there are 536,000 views since this was posted in 2010. So my question is, if you embed the video on your page, do those embed or video embed plays count towards your total YouTube views? And I don't like, if I had like a polling function on Zoom, I would ask you all right now, but I don't. We haven't set that up, so I'll just tell you the answers. The answer is, in most cases, yes. Now, there are some times where it's not the case, and the biggest one is if you enable autoplay. So if you enable autoplay, it's not an actual play click, so it won't count towards your total views. But also, just as a note, you probably shouldn't use autoplay. I'm just going to go out and say it. If you're using autoplay, you know, I think any user who has been to like a local news station website where a video starts playing, and especially when it like pops down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and it's just playing and making sound and all those things, it's not a really welcome experience. So almost all situations, user experience professionals are not a fan of autoplay. It also isn't going to give you the benefit of, you know, understanding how many views your video is actually getting. So there's some documentation about this that I've linked to. What doesn't count as a YouTube view, what does count as a YouTube view. You can read about this when we post our slides, or you could Google it yourself. But I thought that was really interesting. So the plays actually do count if you don't enable autoplay, and there's a couple other weird fringe situations that you can read about. Okay, next bonus question. Can I get data in Google Analytics from YouTube.com? Meaning, if someone is here on YouTube, can you understand how many, for example, people visited a specific page on YouTube in Google Analytics? And up until I was planning for this last week, I had no idea that this was even something that you could think about, because my thought was, well, YouTube has its own analytics platform. You know, you can go get video analytics on YouTube itself if you're a creator. But I also found out, actually through some folks on on the DGU team, our colleagues, that you can, at least for your if you have a channel. So you can put your Google Analytics UAID, which is the unique identifier for your Google Analytics account, and you can send data from your, specifically the channel page, to Google Analytics. And again, I included a link here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see here that here's a screenshot of where in YouTube itself, there's a little box where you can add in a property tracking ID, and then it will start actually giving you data from your channel page in YouTube in a Google Analytics account. Now, this thing talks about all this, but if you were going to do this, you would definitely want to send it to its own specific property. You would not want to mix it in with your normal website data. You'd want to create a new property and have this be specifically for the YouTube information and put it there. And so since you would want to create a new property, and also because the DAP account is very specifically only for government-owned websites, if you are going to do this, please do not put in the DAP Google Analytics account UAID. I really do not want to see data from youtube.com in the Google Analytics account that we manage. We also have filters applied that might filter it out, and you won't see it, and then you'd have to email us, and we'd say, oh, we don't want to see this. So just take my word for it. Sounds like a really cool option. I encourage folks to do it, but send the data to your own agency-managed, non-DAP Google Analytics account. Okay, last bonus question, and I'm sure it's a question that has maybe already popped up in the chat, but what if I embed videos, but they are not YouTube videos? So if you use another hosting service, or you serve the videos directly out of a server, can you track similar things like this with them? And that's a really good question. We don't have DAP configured to do that for you with like an easy option such as YT equals true, but there are suggestions. And so there's another link here that talks about if you use things like HTML5 video player, Vimeo, these other options. And what it does is there are ready-made solutions that you can apply with a tag manager. So Google Tag Manager has container templates or recipes. And if you, for example, use Vimeo as your hosting platform, you can use some ready-made solutions that you can import into your tag manager system and do recording. But it also goes much more in-depth in talking about various different things that you can creating triggers in a tag manager. That's certainly the best way to be able to pass information into Google Analytics regarding events. So if any of you end up using this solution because you embed videos but they're not YouTube, I'd be really interested to hear from you and figure out if this particular page helped, and if you can come up with a solution that is something that is worthwhile to you. Okay, as I noted, keep an eye out for an upcoming code version that fixes the YouTube percentage events. Again, I apologize about that. Definitely not something that I wanted to discover, but bugs happen. The main thing is we're working on a fix so that we can get you the data that you expect in those particular categories. So with that, we're certainly a bit early, 15 minutes, but that gives us lots of time for questions. As always, if you don't want to ask questions today in the chat box, you can email us if you have something very specific at dap@support.digitalgov.gov, and Freddie and I will do our best to answer all the questions that you have. But if there were, I think I saw a lot of things happening in the chat. The little button was lighting up that I can see on my screen here. So Freddie, do we have questions that we can try to answer for folks while we're on the line?
Yes, so we got two questions here. The first was about using Google Tag Assistant and what it looks like when you press the record button and then see events fire.
What is that?
So maybe,
what does it look like?
Yep, what does it look like? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I really hope that I could show you. But I think for some reason, because I'm in Zoom right now, it's like not actually recording the event. If I'm not in Zoom and showing you, you can see it down here. It'll say page view request, keep alive, and then it will have, for example, a little circle, and it'll have the amount of events. And you can click on events and see them. I don't think that, yeah, there's not one there for that one either. It's really bugging me that it's not there for you, but it will show up there. Hopefully, if you use Tag Assistant yourself and you go to a page where, now it's obviously crucial that that you have the YouTube tracker implemented, but if you have it there, then it should be able to show you right here, and you can click on it and it will tell you the different events that happen. Apologies that it's not showing you right now.
Great. And then the last question that we had was, can you tell us how many of the people that paused a video actually finished looking at that video? Is there a way for folks to kind of tease that insight out of the data?
I don't think that there would be a good way to be able to directly have a percentage from the amount of people that paused that also finished. Like, there's a gap in unique events of just about 1,000, right? So there, you would assume that, okay, if you have 6,200 plays and let's just round up and say 5,200 pauses, that there were 1,000 people that hit play and never hit pause. But we don't know how many of those 1,000 people made it to the finish or how many of those 1,000 people just left the page. So I think unfortunately the answer to that is you can't, there isn't enough information in what we have here to be able to directly correlate of the 5,000 some people that paused, how many of them made it to the finish. You only know the total amount of folks that played it, the total amount of folks that hit pause at some point, and the total amount of folks that hit finish, or that made it to the finish, I should say.
That's great. Excellent material.
Those are all the questions?
Yep, those are all the questions.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, I think we can give you some time back. And as always, you can reach out to us at dap@support.digitalgov.gov. I hope this was a valuable webinar. It certainly was valuable for us to prepare for it in finding that we had a bug. And as I noted, we'll be communicating with the entire group once we have a fix for that, and we'll push it to our centralized host location as soon as possible so that the percentages will start recording when the video is playing rather than paused. But I thank everyone for joining us today. I think that YouTube tracking hopefully is something that is valuable for everybody, and that you can turn on the particular, it's really easy to turn on. So hopefully this data will be available to a lot of you that are watching currently. Keep an eye out for an email coming from me regarding the rest of our training sessions for 2020. Our next one will be about a month from now. We're shooting for a webinar every month. So that'll be coming to your inboxes soon. And please, please fill out the survey that you'll get in the follow-up email. It really helps us be able to craft these in ways that we make sure that it's valuable to you. Hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and I'll give you 10 minutes back. So take care.